What? Hold on here. Hey guys, my name's Matt. I'm an expat living in China. I am actually in a city called Ningbo, which is a few hours south of Shanghai by train. I created my YouTube channel a number of years ago in order to chronicle me cycling around the world and like sharing amazing things and trying to explain the world to people that might not be able to set foot on the places that I set foot on, and maybe with that added bit of information, people might become wiser, might become a little bit less judgmental, a little more open-minded. I have a wife and daughter here, and I brought them to America to try to like get away from the virus when it was questionable in China, and then I brought them back from America to China after America was showing me that we're having a little bit of a difficult time getting on top of it. And over the course of the last little while, as America sort of devolves into its number one slot as the worst affected and the most infections due to the coronavirus, a lot of people are reaching out, lashing out, and getting angry. And the direction of their anger is going towards China. And some of it is valid, and a lot of it is overblown and out of fear. And so I wanted to make this series, a short series. It might not be every single one, but every so often I feel like I have something to say, and so I'll say it in these videos to try to give you a little bit of my perspective. If you have something to say in rebuke, I'm more than welcome to hear it. Just keep it civil. I'm simply trying to tell you some things that I've seen, because I've lived in China for 10 years. I've lived and traveled all over the United States, all over Asia. I've been a lot of different places, seen a lot of different things. So I'm gonna pick these. I was gonna do like a top 10 list of this is this, this is this, this is this, but I ended up getting too aggressive. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article. You guys can check out the article I wrote on my website, Jayoe.com. It's in the description below, and you'll see maybe a little bit more of a broad view of a more broad view of all the things I'm going to talk about in this video series. But for now, I'm just going to pick specific issues. In this video, I'm going to talk about the fact that China created this virus intentionally. Now, I think the majority of people don't believe that, but there is a fairly large contingent of people that think that China introduced this virus with the idea that they're going to benefit from it, and had like nefarious ideas when this virus broke out. I don't think that's true for a number of reasons. One, I lived in China a long time. When I moved here, I was in the trading business, so I dealt with factories, I dealt with contracts, I dealt with companies buying from abroad to get products from China. China at this point in time supplies a large share of the products to the world. And the products that are made outside of China, like in the United States, many of those assembly lines are utilizing products from China. China's mode of operandi is to infiltrate industries all around the world and settle in for the long haul. A pandemic, a launch of a disease which has an uncertain outcome, is counter to the idea of having a stable and well-oiled machine. China has been a stable and fairly well-oiled machine for a long time. They've been able to bring industry in, and they've been able to supply industry abroad. And so a pandemic would definitely throw a monkey wrench into that. It would ruin way more than the potential benefit of capitalizing off of a down market. China doesn't have the motivation or potential windfall on the other side of this as much as they would if they just continued to supply products to the world. The idea that China might do this intentionally also makes a lot of illogical sense for the fact that, I mean, let's just put our Dr. Evil caps on and try to devil's advocate this thing and say that China did do it. They launched it inside their own country, which makes not a lot of sense. Why would you create a virus and then launch it inside your own country, killing your own people first? Now, I understand that a lot of people don't believe this, but I'm just kind of catering this to the people that might believe that they did this to themselves. And even if they didn't intend to launch it in their own country, the idea of launching a pandemic just creates instability. China has a 100-year plan. The government of China, however you think about it, is extremely long thinking. It's very difficult for people in West or even in the States where I'm from Detroit, to think about the fact that when you vote for a new president, you went from Obama to Trump. I mean, the whole system upended and flipped. Things that were priorities in one administration were not in the other. Things that we thought were important were not in the other. One side lost, the other side won, and in doing that, everything flipped. In China, everything is focused, and focused long term. It's very difficult for America to really understand the long-term thinking involved in a 100-year plan. Pandemic is a day-to-day plan. A pandemic is so throws up so many question marks on a daily basis that it's just not necessarily how China works. Am I apologizing for China? No. Did I think that there were some problems in the beginning? I think I'll get into that in later episodes. Actually, this episode is simply about the idea that China launched this virus intentionally. I think that just doesn't make a lot of sense. China really wants the status quo, almost wants the status quo more than most countries. They've been doing really well. And their country has been, I mean, society, this city I live in, Ningbo, has just changed in such leaps and bounds in the last 10 years. And to think that they would throw everything up at a question mark when everything had been going steady just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, China is in store for some big changes. The society here is growing and becoming more sophisticated day by day. The cities here are becoming more sophisticated. You can be in my apartment and not realize that you're in China. For all intensive purposes, you could be in the United States or Europe or some sort of Western society. China is booming and growing, and China is trying to adapt as this happens. So I think the road ahead for China is very, very well paved and well laid out. As a matter of fact, I think this pandemic is going to throw a big monkey wrench into their plans for stable growth. Countries outside of China are going to start thinking about bringing their production lines back from China. Countries that are building projects with cooperation from China might be scuttled because of this. Countries that might have had a good relationship with China now might not be, like Australia, like countries in Europe, like America. It went from an adversarial relationship to an aggressively angry and accusatory relationship. Like, there's a lot of anti-China rhetoric going on. China wouldn't welcome that for anything. China doesn't win in those situations, and so I don't even think this is a evil plot gone wrong. It just literally is not the way that China works. If you guys really want to if you really want to sink your teeth into something that might have some far-reaching global takeover sort of connotations to it, you should check out the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a plan for China to literally spread out all over the world and link every country and make every country sort of dependent more than they are on China by establishing land routes and sea routes to and from Asia, to and from Russia, to and from Africa, to and from South America. I mean, literally, they're trying to create systems where they're investing in areas, maybe taking over ports, maybe leveraging ports so much that the countries can't support the port fees anymore, and so via contracts they get the ports in their name by default, as these countries obviously default on things that they were positioned to default on via corrupt governments here. I mean, it's really an interesting story of how China is thinking long term to kind of create a position for themselves to capitalize on in the future. So they're forward thinking, they're long term thinking, and this pandemic is really is not their MO. So I think that I think that a lot of people are afraid. I think a lot of people are nervous. I think when you're out of cash, when you don't have savings, when you have a death in the family or a relative who's in the hospital because of a virus that originated in China, then I can understand. I can understand where that comes from, where that you want to blame. And China definitely holds a role in this whole puzzle of blame. Not all, though, because a virus is a virus, and it's something that can pop up and has popped up in other countries. But I think that as long as we can keep an open perspective and not get into such conspiracy areas, which I see a ton of, then I think that I think we'll be able to stay focused on this more. I'm going to do a number of, let's see how I'm doing, 12 minutes. I think we're going to do a number of these videos. I'll try and talk about a bunch of things. I want to talk about all sorts of interesting things while I'm in China. I'm normally cycling around the world, but today's topic was, do you think China created this virus in order to launch it and destabilize the world? And so I don't think that. China is actually hurting right now. They've had to invest a large amount of their liquid currency in order to stabilize their country's markets in the wave that they took as the virus was taking over. And so the idea that they would do that intentionally, it doesn't fit with the Chinese narrative or the narrative that they have carried for the time that I've lived in China. Let's see, there's a bunch of other topics I'd like to talk about here. We can talk about in future videos. I'd like to talk about the mask hoarding, which was a big topic before. I'd like to talk about the back out of the WHO and how that's been sort of tied into China, and how America in particular wants to back out of the WHO, and how I think that's a horrible idea. Even if the WHO is slightly corrupt, it's the only ball game in town as far as monitoring global health threats, and you can't replace the WHO with WHO 2.0. So I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about trade, global trade, and how that's been affected, has affected, and whether that was a good or a bad thing. I've had an opinion about this for a long time, actually, since Trump instigated his trade war with China. I have an interesting perspective on it, and I've talked to a lot of people in Taiwan and Hong Kong and different places that I've traveled, and in the United States, and I have some opinions on that. I've got a lot of opinions, so I'm gonna share some of these opinions in different videos. If you'd like me to touch on something, I will not talk about anything I don't feel confident talking about. So if there is a topic, why don't you feed me that with some relevant links, and I'll investigate it as much as I can, and then I'll talk about it. But yeah, as far as this episode goes, I don't think that China did this intentionally, but I think it was a horrible accident, and the accident originated in China. I would even like to talk about the comparison, maybe that'll be my next video, the comparison between America and China in the early stages of this virus. I think that's important. There's a real topic of discussion I want to do there. So, I think something just flew into my window. I'm sitting outside of my old apartment. I'm emptying it out piece by piece and sending it all to my new place. Because we moved. We were supposed to move before the coronavirus started expanding, and now it's after the fact, and so I've got to finish this because we were kind of up in quarantine and in quarantine again, and then we weren't allowed to go out, and now we're allowed to go out, and quite interesting. As a matter of fact, do you hear that sound? That's a pile driver. It's probably across the river. They're driving piles into the ground for the foundation for a big apartment complex across the street. Just amazing amount of building here in China. That's the other thing I'm thinking. China is it's not what a lot of people think. I'm sort of stuck here until borders open up and I can return to my cycle tour. So in the meantime, I'm trying to make use of my time and make some really nice, interesting, and educational videos that can help add a little perspective to people out there, because there is a lot of perspective on all sides, and some of it is very scary. And I think that if we go into this with empathy and care and understanding, it'll definitely be better for all of us in the end. Take it easy, guys. Be safe. Jayoe. And if you'd like to share this video, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you on the next one. Give me some comments in the description on might be some things that you might want to cover. Thanks.